Hello theory students. This is just a quick video for the second lesson in task-based learning. Currently week 12 of the curriculum, task-based learning, what is a task? So we're building off of the task cycle, which we already know, and we're looking into what exactly a task is, okay? Because in order to make a task-based lesson, we need to have a good idea of what a task is. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm actually going to go through your homework questions, give you some answers for those homework questions, which you can compare to your own, and then I'm going to take you through the varieties of tasks and specifically talking about what could be possible outcomes for the types of tasks that they list, because as we'll talk about, the outcome of a task is probably the most important element of the task. Like if you don't have an outcome, as we'll say, if you don't have an outcome, you don't have a task in the sense of a task-based learning. All right, so jumping right in, this is now week 12 homework question, focus question 1. Focus question 1, when we say task in task-based learning, what do we mean? What is a task? What are the key features of a task? So the reason we're talking about this, of course, is because the term task is a very generally used term, even in English language teaching. In a general definition, a task is just something you have to do, right? But in task-based learning, it has to have these components. So in task-based learning, your task has to be something that is meaning focused, and as you can see in your reading, meaning focused means that meaning is primary. This kind of gets into question 3, but meaning is primary. Like the meaning of what you're saying is more important than the opposite of meaning, which of course is form, right? So it's more important that you communicate what you're trying to say rather than getting everything accurate grammatically. Okay, so it has to be meaning focused. You're focused on the meaning of what you're saying in your task. And in that sense, it's also what we call goal-oriented. In other words, there is a communicative purpose or a communicative goal in your task. There's something you're trying to accomplish. Okay? There's something the learners are trying to do. It's something motivating them. Are they trying to convince someone of something? Right? Are they trying to change someone's mind? Are they trying to dissuade someone from doing something, like tell them not to do it for certain reasons? Are they trying to negotiate a lower price on something? It could be any number of language functions. That would be your communicative goal. So when we talk about some of the tasks that are not tasks, one of the things they might be lacking is a reason for writing the sentences or a reason for saying something. You know, what are you trying to accomplish? What's your communicative goal? What's your language function? The other thing, we're still on number 1 now. The other thing that a task must have is an outcome. And this is something I've been saying since we started talking about TBL. You need to have an outcome. And your outcome is the thing that is produced as a result of that meaningful collaboration. There's an outcome. There's something that they can then present at the end and say, here is the thing that we produced. Here's the outcome of our collaboration, right? So in the case of our demonstration, right? In the case of the demonstration in class, your outcome is it's your poster. You know, you work together to create this poster, then there's a presentation about the poster, right? So there's got to be something that they're trying to produce, the fruit of their labor, so to speak. That's your outcome. And if you don't have that, then it's not a task, right? So moving on to question number 2. What's the role of grammar in task-based learning? Well, you know there is grammar there. You know there is kind of a target language, but it kind of appears later on. The focus is not put on that until the end of the cycle, right? But theoretically, students could be using that target grammar as they are communicating about the task, but they can also use any other language they know, because it's more of a fluency task, the first part, right? After the pre-task and they're doing the task together, it's more fluency focused, but they could be using that grammar there as a means of accomplishing that communicative goal. Now we're going to focus directly on that target grammar at the end, and then it's more of a form focus, but we start with that meaning, we start with fluency. So a wrong answer would be that there is no role of grammar at all, because of course you're not going to speak without grammar, and there is a method to this, and there is a role for it. Number 3, what's the role of meaning? As I mentioned with number 1, we're talking about this as a meaning-focused teaching technique, right? What's the role of meaning? Meaning is primary. And what that means is it's the main focus, right? So in order to accomplish your task, in order to produce the outcome, in order to work together, you're constantly focused on the meaning of what you're saying and doing, rather than the opposite, which is form. Like I must use this grammar every time. You're focused on this meaningful collaboration to accomplish the task. And you'll hear the phrase meaning before form a lot. Task-based learning is not the only approach that says meaning before form. A lot of communicative language teaching in general is going to put meaning before form. And it arises from this idea that, people speak to accomplish, goals, right? And they don't speak to produce certain grammar accurately several times in a row. They speak to accomplish communicative goals. And so during that process, certain grammar comes up, and that grammar can be focused on later for more of that accuracy stuff. But when we're talking about TBL, that meaning is before form, meaning is primary, making your message understood to accomplish your communicative goal. That's the most important thing. All right, and that's all meaning. Everything I just said there is all about meaning. All right, so number 4, you found that the writer introduces this idea of the gong game, which is the yes-no game. So it comes from a British talk show that's 1 million years old. Super simple. They just can't say yes or no, and they're asking mostly personalized questions, right? And the goal is to answer them truthfully without saying yes or no. And the purpose of this activity, the purpose of this example, oh, by the way, importantly, it's very, very seldom that a contestant can go through the whole game without saying yes or no. And even though it seems so simple, and of course the whole crowd enjoys it when people say yes or no, gong, and they're out of the game. the reason for this example in our context of this TBL chapter is to illustrate that it's quite difficult, even for native speakers, to focus both on meaning and on form. In other words, to focus on what they are saying, that's the meaning, right? And how they are saying it, so that's the form of the grammar, the form of the vocabulary, or whatever it is. And so, if we can't focus on both at the same time, we can't expect our learners to focus on both at the same time. And the author goes on to say that if you require your students to use certain grammar in a certain activity, and you say, well, but it's meaningful because they're talking about themselves or whatever, they're going to do one of two things, right? They're either going to focus so much on that form that their speech is really stilted and unnatural and maybe not accurate, maybe not truthful, maybe not that useful. Okay, so like use the use the past continuous to talk about what you did yesterday. Sounds meaningful, sounds personalized, but it would be really hard to do and continue talking about the past continuous, right? It would sound weird. It'd be something like, yesterday I was eating breakfast while my mom was working at work and my dad was sleeping. It just sounds stilted, like lots of stops. Okay, so one thing they're gonna do if you require that focus on that grammar, that form too much, is it's gonna be kind of not natural. It's gonna slow them down. It's gonna sound a little weird, and it's gonna take away from the focus on meaning because they're so focused on form. The other thing they're gonna do is they're gonna say, all right, teacher, yeah, I'll use your past continuous. And then they're gonna focus on meaning, right? They're gonna say, oh, yeah, yesterday I had breakfast, it was great. I had these 2 sausage patties that I ordered from this guy who's got this business over in Gyeonggi-do. I had some eggs with it, and man. So anyway, I took a shower and I went to the train station and got the train to work. and what happened was, here I am talking about yesterday. Past continuous didn't really come up, and that's totally natural. Okay, so one of two things is going to happen if you require a focus on form. They're either going to focus too much on that form and they're going to lose that natural, meaningful communication, or they're going to forget your form requirement, and they're just going to focus on meaning anyway. So that's the gong game, basically. Number five. Do you think L1 use is acceptable in TBL? Do you think it's acceptable? Now, this is an opinion question, but if you look carefully at the reading, if you think about it and read between the lines also, you'll see that there's nothing in TBL that says there's no place for L1, right? I'm sure you have your own opinions on this. But as a matter of fact, a big name in TBL, Rod Ellis. Rod Ellis has famously supported it. And if you'd like, I will include this article that I'm quoting right now in your Google Classroom. But he says in his study on TBL, he says that it's possible to identify in broad terms the kinds of processes that people doing this kind of task performance strive for, what they're trying to do. Conversational discourse. Okay, so how they're talking in a normal conversation, that's one of the processes that we strive for. Number 2, discourse that encourages the formulation of messages explicitly. Okay, so how they're going to express themselves explicitly in that interaction. Opportunities for students to take linguistic risks. You notice from your reading that they can't be afraid of making mistakes. We've got to discourage that. Let them take risks. And the way that we discourage that is by saying, look, mistakes are okay. It's totally natural. Try things out. That's the only way you improve. Number 4, occasions where task participants focus implicitly or explicitly on specific linguistic forms. So at a certain point, there needs to be a form focus, which you know already tends to happen at the end. Number 5 is the interesting one. Number 5, shared goals for the task, including the use of the L1 to establish these. So what does that mean? That means that what Rod Ellis is saying is that you have a place for L1, potentially in establishing the goals for the task. I mean, particularly at a very low level, why wouldn't you give students that option and say, look, let's break down what you need to do here. You guys need to agree on what you need to do. Switch over to Korean. Make that understood, the goal of the task, and then do the rest in English. They actually find that when you do that, it's going to lead to more use of English during the task, more varied use of English, and more developed English. So I would say, I'm agreeing with Ellis. I've always said L1 has a place. I think the reason all these communicative teachers say there's no place for L1 is, well, there's a lot of monolingual English speakers out there who need jobs. That's what I think. Number 6, this is, again, is from Ellis. I'll put this study in your Google Classroom. Number 6, effective scaffolding of the participants' efforts to communicate in L2. Well, we know that already, don't we? You got to scaffold your learners. Okay, so all of that was just to answer number 5. It's an opinion, but I support Ellis's opinion here. Number 6, how is TBL similar or different to PPP? We have said this 1,000 times. PPP and TBL, they're two sides of the same coin. Basically, you have similar stages in TBL. They're just in different order, right? You start with fluency, basically. Okay, and you end with a focus on that grammar, so that the present part. All right, so this has been my video for week 12. Actually, let's do one more thing. I promised you one more thing, and that is, let's go through these task types. I'm going to talk about the task types, and I'm going to suggest some outcomes. All right, so number 1, listing is a task type that was included in your reading. So processes included brainstorming, fact-finding, etc. A possible outcome would be a completed list, or a draft of a mind map is something that could be an outcome. In our class demonstration, the listing task was the excellent teacher one, right? So the outcome there would be the list of the traits of an excellent teacher. Ordering and sorting, it could include all of these categories: sequencing, ranking, categorizing, classifying, This is very useful, especially if there's a concept they just learned. Like now let's rank them all according to how well they fit this concept. Or personal preferences. You could say, all right, let's order these 5 restaurants in the Sukdae Chongpadong area, most delicious to least delicious. Okay? And your outcome then would be the completed order, or the sorted, everything sorted into the right categories. Or you could think about our class activity, which was the story of a sandwich. And the outcome there was the completed story, right? So something you could then present at the end. This is what we were talking about. And what I like about that one, by the way, story of a sandwich, is I always hear Korean during that, which is fine. Maybe you were just talking about the goal of the activity, right? As Ellis suggests. Okay, number 3. Comparing, right? Which could include matching things and relating them to each other, similarities and differences, easy peasy, right? You could have students do a Venn diagram, right? A classic would be, city life versus country life. And your outcome would be then the completed Venn diagram, or, a poster or whatever they're making. This was a favorite of our task from class, finding common ground with your group mates, some things that you have in common. All right, and the outcome there would be the completed comparison document, right? Problem solving. We don't have a nice bullet point list here because problem solving tasks can be quite varied, right? They tend to, as it says here, make demands on people's intellectual and reasoning powers, and they could be challenging but engaging and satisfying to solve that problem. The example from our class was the letter to a future student, letter to a friend, right? And the problem was actually a future problem you're helping them solve, right? The problem being YL TESOL. And the completed outcome would be your completed letter, right? Your completed letter with advice about what to do in that situation. Personal experiences is a little bit of a freer task you could do. And of course we've seen many examples of personalizing in the YL TESOL program. It's something that we always do, like talk about yourself, right? This kind of thing. But remember, we're talking about TBL here. So in this case, it would have to be a clearly defined task with a communicative purpose, and it would have to be personalizing in a meaning-focused way with a communicative goal and outcome to produce at the end. So, as it says here, just saying, talk about your weekend to your friend, to your partner, to your shoulder partner, to your face partner, talk about what you're going to do after school. I mean, that's fun and it's a nice little icebreaker, but it's not a TBL task. You need some kind of outcome. As it says here, not directly goal-oriented. Yeah. But these open tasks, and they can be more difficult to get going. What I would do with a personal experience thing is definitely you want to have some kind of outcome, right? So you want to have some kind of communicative goal. So not only are you going to turn and talk to your partner, but what's your reason, right? So there could be some reason. So you're talking to your partner, you're interviewing your partner. It could be, well, find out 2 things you didn't know about your partner, write them down and share with the class. Okay, so now you have at least a reason to listen It's an active listening thing. Your outcome is the two things that you wrote down, right? It could be something like that, something that simple. But make sure there's some kind of outcome. Personal experiences. You guys had the task in class. Personal experiences where you're talking about your best vacation ever, right? Now the outcome is, if you wrote it down about each of your partners, that thing you wrote down, that's your outcome. Okay, you can do it differently, right? You could say, now we're gonna take those 3 experiences from the 3 group members, and now we're gonna make it kind of a ranking thing. Okay, whose was really the coolest experience, right? It was the one who saw BTS play in Bali or whatever. I don't know. Okay, and number 6 is a lot of different creative tasks. So any chance for students to rehearse something and practice it creatively, or they do some kind of research out of class. I've had students go into Itaewon and Haebangchon and interview foreigners, right? That kind of thing. Now, it's not a TBL task unless there's some kind of outcome. So I can't say just go ask some questions. So I would have to say, all right, well, your goal is to find the 3 things that your 10 international people dislike, and 3 things that the 10 international people like about life in Korea. Right? Something like that. Put it on a poster, that's your outcome. Whatever it is. Okay, so that's creative tasks. And the rest of this gets into closed and open tasks, reasons you might like either one of those. But just keep in mind that every task needs an outcome, every task needs a communicative purpose. All right, guys, thank you very much, and your next video is coming soon. Bye-bye.